So the DJI Osmo 360 is actually an incredible camera for capturing incredible low light footage. So in this video today, I'm going to show you the results you can get when using the exact settings and tools that I use. And the good news, as far as special tools go, there's only one tool that you need to get these results, and that is a gimbal. And the reason you need it is because in order to get this really good footage in low light, you do need to use a shutter speed that is pretty slow. I'll show you in a moment which shutter speed I recommend, but the problem is when you're using a slow shutter speed, the electronic image stabilization, which is known as rock steady on DJI cameras, that can create jitter in your footage, and your footage is gonna have this shaky appearance to it when you're moving. And that is where this gimbal comes in. This gimbal is going to help your camera stabilize enough that even if you have it handheld with the rock steady on, you're not going to get those micro jitters in your footage. I'll link to this gimbal in the description below. This gimbal can be used with a multitude of cameras. It can be used with a lot of action cameras. It can be used with smartphones, and it can be used with quite a few smaller DSLR and mirrorless cameras. So it is a little bit of an upfront investment, but it is going to get you very good results. So next, let's get into the settings that you need to set on your Osmo 360 in order to capture this incredible footage. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, you could use Super Night mode on here and you can get good results, but the Super Night mode results are going to have a few weaknesses that using my manual method will not have. One of them is it's going to crank the ISO really high, and in order to offset all the noise and grain that's created, that image is going to have a lot of denoising applied, and it's going to look very soft in a lot of places and very unnatural, and sometimes it's going to look lower quality. So you're going to find that the footage with the manual mode that I'm going to show you here, it's going to look a lot more natural, and it's going to look a whole lot better at nighttime. So what you want to do is you want to click down here in the lower left, and you want to go to panoramic video. And when you get to panoramic video, what you want to do is you first of all want to swipe up, and you want to make sure it's set to 8K 30. And then up here with the lens mode, I recommend just keeping it set to wide. You're going to reframe this later on in post-production anyway. Once you've set that, you're then going to go over here to the advanced parameters, and your exposure is probably going to start off on auto. And as you can see with auto, it's properly exposed there. But of course, my other settings are going to make this way overexposed because it's daytime right now. But don't worry about that. At nighttime, these settings are going to be perfect. So keep that in mind when I show you these here. It's going to look very white and overexposed. So when we click over here, the first thing we want to do is you want to make sure Pro is selected up there. If Pro is not selected, you're not going to be able to change these settings. So make sure Pro is selected in yellow. Next, you're going to go to exposure and you're going to click M. And when you click M, you're going to toggle over here. M stands for manual, by the way. And you're going to toggle this to 1/60. 1/60 is not only a much slower shutter speed than the default will be, but that also is the 180-degree shutter rule, meaning that shutter speed is twice the frames per second as far as that second number. So 60 is twice 30, and we're using 30 frames per second. That's going to help you have really natural looking motion blur, and it's just gonna make that footage look great. And then for your ISO over here, you wanna set this to 800. I find that 800 on here is a good balance with properly exposing, but also not having too much noise and grain. So then you're gonna hit the check mark right here. And then for the white balance, you wanna click M, and I recommend setting this to anywhere between 3200 and 4000K. And my personal favorite is 3800K. That is the white balance I use for all of these samples you're seeing today. And 3800K is just a really good white balance color at nighttime. So that's my personal favorite. But if you want it to be a little bit bluer and cooler, do 3200K. And if you want it slightly warmer, go with 4000K. Then we're gonna click the check mark. Now for the color, both color modes on here are 10-bit. So you could do normal 10-bit or you could do D-Log M 10-bit. This is really going to depend if you want to color grade this later on. If you're not gonna do any grading at all, keep it at normal 10-bit. If you are gonna do grading later on, do D-Log M 10-bit. These samples were just filmed with the normal color mode, and I think they look great. But if you wanna be able to get just a little bit more of those shadows and highlight details and customize a little more, then you might wanna do the D-Log M 10-bit. And then finally down here for the image adjustment, For the texture, I keep this at -2. I don't want the image to be overly sharp because I can always add a little bit of sharpness later on when editing. But also for the noise reduction, I don't want much noise reduction applied because I want this footage to be as crisp and natural looking as possible. And that's part of the reason I'm not using the Supernight mode to begin with. So what I like to do here is I like to keep this at -2, which is the lowest setting. And all of these samples were filmed with that -2. And I feel like the camera did a great job not having much noise because of my manual settings and now ISO being at 800. But if you find that your camera gives you a little more noise than you would like, you can do -1 or 0 here. And that's going to apply some denoising to it, which again is really helpful in low light, but it shouldn't go overboard. And then those are all the settings that you need to set. At this point, you are good to go. You have the key manual settings that you need for capturing the very best low light and nighttime footage. And when you pair these settings with that gimbal, you're going to get absolutely incredible results. And of course, one thing to note when you're reframing later on, because of the gimbal being there, you are going to be limited with the perspective from your camera. So when you're reframing, you're basically only going to be able to use the footage that's in front of the gimbal and off a little bit to the left side because that gimbal arm is going to be in the way on the right side. So this is a limitation of using the gimbal. So you just want to keep in mind that wherever that one lens of your Osmo 360 is facing, that's going to be the footage that you can easily use later on. If you try these manual settings handheld, you are going to have a lot of jitter and a fair bit of ghosting in those. The gimbal really is essential, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a one-size-almost-fits-all gimbal. So if you'd like to learn more about how to get the best results with the DJI Osmo 360, check out this playlist right here.